Imagine someone everyone loves. The kind of person who walks into any room and changes the atmosphere with a simple smile. Who helps without asking for anything in return. Who listens when no one else has time. Who lends a hand even when no one else wants to get involved. Now imagine discovering that this person, maybe they were never who they claimed to be. It's shocking, isn't it? It sounds like something out of a movie. But what if I told you this story really happened, and that the line between hero and villain can be thinner than you think? We often judge the world by its packaging. We trust too much in what we see, and when the truth emerges, it not only changes what we know, it changes how we feel. This is the story of a man who conquered an entire city with generosity, kindness, and compassion. But it's also the story of buried secrets, of an erased past, and of an identity built on ruins. It's the kind of story that tests our emotional intelligence, our capacity for forgiveness, and how much truth we can bear without giving up empathy. And here's a warning: nothing in this video is simple. Prepare to feel fear, hope, shame, love, insecurity, and even gratitude. All at the same time. You'll witness a true story of overcoming, redemption, courage, and above all, humanity. You'll see how understanding can be more powerful than judgment. And maybe, just maybe, you'll end this video questioning something you've never been told to think about. How far would you go to hide your past? And more importantly, how far would you be willing to go to transform it? Because sometimes what you admire most in someone is exactly what they've fought their entire life to hide. Samuel Lawson walked the streets of Willow Creek as if the sun itself accompanied him. He was the kind of presence that warmed the atmosphere, even on the cloudiest days. His words always carried a dose of wisdom and humility, capable of soothing even the most tormented hearts. The elders saw him as an example of rare humanity, while the younger generation followed him with the confidence of someone who finds a mentor. It was impossible to mention his name without associating it with empathy, kindness, and the power of goodness. And it wasn't an exaggeration. Samuel seemed born to serve, to inspire, to sow affection wherever he went. In every gesture, there was a trace of sincerity. He was the kind of person who looked into your eyes and saw your soul at charity events. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave. He quietly distributed meals to the homeless, helped struggling teenagers regain hope in their studies, and surprisingly wrote motivational letters for cancer patients, even without knowing them. With admirable emotional intelligence, he listened more than he spoke and never judged without first seeking understanding. The most curious thing was that, even surrounded by so many people, there was a trace of loneliness in his gaze that few noticed, as if deep down he carried an invisible weight. But who cared? He was light, he was love. He was that rare soul who seemed to have come into this world with a greater purpose, to spread compassion and acceptance wherever he went. Over the years, Samuel became something of a local legend. Not for doing something extraordinary, but for turning the ordinary into an extraordinary experience. He was a symbol of hope, a bridge between generations, living proof that good people still existed in this increasingly cynical world. Children ran to hug him, mothers trusted him, fathers admired him. Everyone, without exception, had a story of gratitude connected to him. But as life always holds its deepest mysteries in well-dressed silences, no one ever dared ask where he had come from. It was as if he had simply appeared, a gift without a sender. And this, despite its charm, left a subtle, almost imperceptible doubt in the air, one that would surface sooner than many imagined. As admired as Samuel Lawson was, there was one detail that over time began to subtly bother some of the more observant. He never talked about his past. There were no old photos, no childhood stories, or family memories. It was as if his life had started from scratch there in that small American town. When someone approached him, trying to learn more, he would smile tenderly and say, "The past doesn't matter when the present is good." It was a beautiful phrase, and he repeated it like a mantra. But as the years passed, this lack of roots began to breed a tinge of distrust. After all, no matter how reserved a person may be, there's always something that slips through the cracks. A memory, a smell, a longing. The lack of records aroused curiosity in some and unease in others. Deep down, human beings need to belong, and this applies to both the newcomer and the one who receives them. The town's elders, for example, began to wonder, how could such a good man have left no trace of his past? The young people, who saw Samuel as a model of perseverance, also noticed that he never spoke of old teachers, childhood friends, or youthful loves. He was a living enigma. A role model, yes, but shrouded in a fog no one could penetrate. Still, there were those who argued, maybe he experienced something painful. Who are we to judge? And mind you, this required empathy and respect. But the doubt persisted. Over time, these silences became heavier than any spoken word. And, like any small community, where relationships intertwine like roots underground, questions began to echo in whispers. Have you heard his accent? Doesn't sound like it's from around here, does it? Or, he's so caring for others, but has anyone ever cared for him? Between the lines, compassion, curiosity, and a hint of fear of the unknown mingled. The most intriguing thing is that, even with this aura of mystery, no one wanted to believe there was anything wrong with Samuel. It was as if everyone's heart wanted to protect him, as if to say, leave him alone, he's done more for us than many born here. But life always finds a way to pull back the veil on what needs to be revealed. On the morning Samuel's routine faded, the sky was clear, the coffee smelled cozy, and the birds seemed to sing with more joy than usual. He picked up the newspaper, as he always did, but something different was stuck between the pages. A brown envelope, unstamped, with no return address, just his handwritten name. That alone would send a chill down anyone's spine. But not Samuel, or at least, not right away. He opened it with the serenity of someone with no secrets. Until his eyes fell on the single sentence inside the letter. You can pretend to them, but not to me. There was no signature, just that sentence that cut deeper than a blade. What happened next was as swift as it was inexplicable. Samuel fell to the floor, unconscious. When he woke up in the hospital, surrounded by worried eyes, he tried to downplay the situation. He said he'd felt ill from the pressure, that he'd felt this before. But no matter how much his mouth said one thing, his eyes screamed another. The more attentive noticed, there was something different in his expression. The smile was now shorter, the gaze more scattered, the touch of his hands less firm. It was as if that anonymous phrase had reactivated something long hidden, a trauma, a fear, a memory. The people around him, overcome with empathy, tried not to press him. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. The once unshakable trust began to be tested in silence. In the following days, Samuel began to avoid certain places. He canceled appointments, postponed social project meetings, and declined invitations to lectures. The community, accustomed to his constant presence, noticed his absence as if missing their own air. That figure who symbolized stability now exuded something different, insecurity. Curiously, no one could touch him with direct questions. Perhaps out of respect, perhaps out of fear of what they might discover. And the letter, gone, as if it had never existed. But there were those who swore they had seen it. Her sentence began to circulate in closed groups, in whispers filled with curiosity and distrust. It was as if time had stopped for an instant. before giving rise to a truth that could no longer be contained. It was the event of the year. The town's main square was filled with colorful stalls, entire families, children running around, and a local band playing those songs everyone knows how to sing with their eyes closed. Samuel, as always, smiled and hugged everyone who approached. His charisma was magnetic. He walked among the people as if he belonged, as if he had built this whole thing with his own hands. But amidst so many familiar faces, a new one appeared. A woman with white hair and a hesitant gait approached, her eyes brimming with tears. When she saw Samuel, she stopped. She looked him straight in the eye and with a choked voice said, "Elliot? Elliot, is that you, my son?" The silence was immediate, as if time had held its breath. Samuel froze. He tried to smile, but his face paled. "You're mistaken," he murmured, trying to move on. But the woman insisted, gripping his arm with the strength only love and longing can produce. "I would recognize you anywhere. You're my son, Elliot Warren. You disappeared and never came back." The words echoed through the people around like thunder in a blue sky. The giggles ceased. The music seemed to grow quieter. The woman was gently pulled away by volunteers, but confusion had already set in. For the first time, people looked at Samuel and saw not only the man they knew, but also the shadow of someone he might once have been. In the days that followed, the story spread like wildfire. Some said the woman was senile, mistaking Samuel for someone from her past. Others swore they saw the trembling in his hands, the cold sweat, the look of suppressed panic. "Did you see how white he turned?" they would say in the bakeries, in the bank lines, in the messaging groups. It was as if the entire city was trying to piece together a puzzle they hadn't even known existed. The name Elliot Warren began to appear in internet searches, in street corner whispers. And that seemingly isolated episode was like a trigger. Because it's one thing to hear rumors. Quite another when someone says, in front of everyone, "I know who you are." And that changes everything. In the small town library, where almost no one entered these days, a curious young man named Nate, an aspiring journalist, began connecting the dots. The story of the elderly woman who had called Samuel Elliot stuck in his head. He decided to investigate without pretense, driven simply by a restlessness that many would call perspicacity or perhaps just intuition. Scouring public archives, old news reports, and resident records, he noticed a glaring gap. Samuel simply showed up in town in 2009. Before that, nothing. No check-in records, no school records, no local birth certificate. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere. And for a good observer, absences speak as much as presences. Nate, with courage and a touch of daring, decides to dig deeper. With the help of a retired librarian, one of those soft-spoken ladies with an enviable memory, Nate accesses files digitally archived in the state database. He searches schools, hospitals, donor and volunteer registries. Nothing. No trace of Samuel Lawson before that year. In any public database, he was invisible. And what was most disturbing was how perfectly he fit into the town. A kind, cultured, generous man with abundant emotional intelligence, who knew exactly how to help each person. This wasn't normal. Or was he simply too brilliant? People began to talk. How come no one noticed before? Why would someone hide their past if they had nothing to fear? And amid the uncomfortable smiles, a shadow appeared. The local press, upon learning of the discoveries, also took an interest. Small blogs began publishing notes about the dear citizen's dubious identity. Samuel remained silent. He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it. He just kept the same smile, this time sadder. But inside him, there was an earthquake. And that tremor was spreading. The community's trust was cracking. The respect he had cultivated with so much affection was beginning to give way to insecurity, because it wasn't just about who he was, but about what he was hiding. And what would come next, well, it would no longer be possible to hide. After all, every truth, sooner or later, finds a crack through which to escape. The headline appeared like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky on a quiet afternoon. Samuel Lawson is actually Elliot Warren, a former fugitive investor wanted for fraud and a suspect in a murder case. The entire country was in shock. The special report aired in prime time, featuring old photos, face comparisons, interviews with former colleagues, and excerpts from the cold case. The man everyone admired in this small rural town was accused of embezzling millions of dollars in a corruption scheme involving major corporations in New York. But there was more, something that chilled even the most skeptical hearts. Elliot disappeared the same day his fiancée Evelyn was found dead under still unclear circumstances. The news dropped like a bombshell. Samuel, or Elliot, was last seen on that fateful night, leaving an office building before disappearing from view for more than a decade. And now he was the same man who tutored at-risk teenagers, organized donation drives for needy families, and brought soup to the homeless on the coldest winter days. The duality between the alleged criminal and the exemplary citizen caused everyone to feel a moral stalemate. How could they trust someone who had hidden so much? How could they reconcile their compassion with the fear of having been deceived for so long? It was the kind of discovery that turns one's soul inside out, forcing even the most confident to rethink their own judgments. The city became a target for national media. Reporters camped outside Samuel's house, cameras on every corner, microphones outstretched, searching for any statement. While some residents remained silent, others exploded with indignation. "We took in a fugitive without knowing it," some said. "But he saved my daughter from depression," others shouted. The tension grew, and along with it, an inevitable question arose. If he really was that criminal, why didn't he try to escape again? Why did he stay, knowing he could be discovered? His silence, more than ever, was deafening. But within that silence, something was about to be said. Because no one can carry a truth like that forever. The town, once known for its peaceful neighbors and Sunday potlucks, was now experiencing an unprecedented emotional rift. In the church pews, in the school hallways, even in the bakery line, the name Samuel or Elliot became a constant source of controversy. Some referred to him with affection and gratitude, using arguments like, "No one has done more for us than him." Others, however, said they were living with a dangerous liar, hiding in plain sight. The conflict took shape, gained voice, and unfortunately, even hostility. Signs were torn down, graffiti sprayed with accusations and defenses. And the small town that once echoed with laughter and quiet footsteps was now traversed by distrust, insecurity, and judgment. Emotionally, it was as if every citizen was forced to choose between two feelings that, theoretically, shouldn't coexist: love and fear. The pain of discovery stirred emotion in those who had shared their lives with Samuel, and the raw truth triggered anger in those who felt betrayed. The kindness he had spread for so many years was now under suspicion. Was it all manipulation? Asked the most skeptical. Or did he truly redeem himself, and we pay for not seeing the transformation? Countered the defenders. It was the kind of dilemma that demands more than justice. It demands emotional intelligence, humility, and above all, the courage to face someone's humanity in its entirety, not just what we are comfortable accepting. And as expected, social media amplified the chaos. Fake profiles, conspiracy theories, sensationalist videos went viral in minutes. The case became a moral war, a battle between past and present, between what is known and what is felt. Families began to fight among themselves, longtime friends, began to avoid the issue, and even young people, previously oblivious to the case, took sides. But amidst so much division, one thing became clear: the city was no longer the same. And within this collective turmoil, something needed to emerge. Because as much as people sought justice, perhaps what they really needed was an explanation. And it was about to come not by obligation, but by choice. That night, the high school auditorium was packed like never before. The air seemed thicker, as if the entire town was holding its breath. Samuel or Elliot took the stage amidst looks that mixed suspicion, sadness, hope, and even a hint of affection. He held a brown envelope which trembled slightly between his fingers. But his voice, when he began to speak, was firm. He didn't immediately apologize, nor did he try to justify himself. He simply told, with cutting honesty, what many there never expected to hear: the real story behind the mask he wore for over a decade. And the most impressive thing? He didn't blame anyone. He said he ran away because he was afraid. Afraid of being condemned for something he didn't do, and of being forgotten by someone he couldn't save. "I was Elliot Warren, yes," he began. "Evelyn, my fiancée, was my life. When she died, a part of me went with her." He explained how he uncovered the corruption scheme at the company he worked for, and how he tried to report it, but was silenced with threats. When Evelyn began investigating on her own, she also became a target. The night she died was the breaking point. "They wanted me to disappear, and I disappeared." But Samuel didn't tell the story to defend himself. He told it because he was tired. Tired of lying, of hiding, of not being able to look into the eyes of the people he'd grown to love in that city. He told it because, after so many years, he'd learned that the only way to truly change was to stop running. Some cried, others lowered their heads, some glared. But there, in that stuffy room, he was finally whole, neither hero nor villain, human. Human. Samuel spoke of how he rebuilt himself by helping others, of how compassion, generosity, and initiative saved him from the abyss. He said he understood those who wanted to walk away, but that his only hope was that, someday, someone there would look at him and see more than a name on a criminal record, see the person he had become. It was at that moment that the room, previously filled with tension, filled with silence, a true silence, the kind that comes when the soul understands more than the heart can yet accept. But that was only the beginning. What came next would define not only his fate, but that of the entire town. The trial of Samuel Lawson, or Elliot Warren, went beyond the confines of the small town and dominated national news. Soon, television stations set up tents in front of the local courthouse. Commentators were divided in passionate opinions, and social media became heated arenas for moral debate. It was more than a legal trial. It was a mirror of our own struggles with redemption, change, and second chances. And the question hanging in the air was simple, yet brutal. Can someone who did so much good be forgiven for something they may have done or failed to do in the past? Inside the courtroom, emotions ran high. Lawyers were heated, testimonies were tearful, and especially the defense witnesses, dozens of ordinary people who took the stand to tell how Samuel had changed their lives. Wayward youths returned to school, families rebuilt. With his help, elderly people cared for with tender care, teenagers inspired by his words. It was as if the power of kindness itself rose to speak. But the prosecution, relentless, brought documents, old charges, and the argument that no one should be above the law. The jury was divided, literally, for hours. The 12 citizens who decided Samuel's fate couldn't reach a consensus. In the end, a decision emerged. He would be convicted, yes, but with a reduced sentence. The sentence, charged with meaning, caused both relief and outrage. For some, it was justice with understanding. For others, it set a dangerous precedent. But what no one could deny was the commotion this case provoked. The entire country was forced to discuss topics it had previously avoided: resilience, reconstruction, and even the very concept of forgiveness. Samuel didn't emerge unscathed, but he emerged hurt. And with that, another journey began. After all, the end of a trial is never the end of the story. Leaving prison a few years later, Samuel Lawson didn't walk through the gates with resentment or arrogance. He walked out with his shoulders slightly hunched, not from the weight of shame, but from the humility that time had taught him to carry. There was no crowd waiting, just a few familiar discreet faces with teary eyes and pounding hearts. Part of the town still preferred to forget him, but another part, silent and persevering, decided to see him for what he had become, not just for what he once was. He met Mia again, a widow he had helped rebuild after losing everything in a fire. She hugged him as if hugging her own son. That was when Samuel understood. Perhaps he didn't need to be accepted by everyone. He just needed to be accepted by those who believe in the power of reconciliation. Over time, he began giving lectures at schools and community centers. Not about finance or law, but about something more precious: emotional responsibility. He spoke about choices, consequences, and how emotional intelligence and sincerity are tools for overcoming challenges. And most importantly, he taught the value of truth, not the cold kind that condemns, but the kind that liberates with love and inspiration. In one of his speeches he said, "If you hide something, it controls you. If you expose it, it becomes just part of your story." Young people began seeking him guidance, families began inviting him to events, and little by little, the name Samuel became associated again with what he had always wanted. Purpose. Of course, it wasn't easy. Nor was it quick. There were still sidelong glances on street corners, whispers in cafes, and rehashed headlines trying to rekindle old wounds. But Samuel learned that true forgiveness requires resilience, and that inner peace doesn't depend on the approval of others, but on one's own conscience. And it was in this state of mind that he wrote a book not about crimes or accusations, but about new beginnings. A human, moving account filled with affection, gratitude, and hope, because after all, he was loved, even before he was understood. But now, finally, he was seen in his entirety. And most importantly, he was ready to live without masks, without escapes, with the courage of someone who understands that the truth can hurt, but can also heal. Now stop for a moment and ask yourself, how many times have you judged someone without knowing what they carried inside? How many stories have you abandoned halfway because you heard a rumor, saw a headline, or simply thought you knew too much? The truth is that, like Samuel, many carry invisible burdens, traumas, mistakes, new beginnings, falls, and above all, sincere attempts at rebuilding. And here's a burning question. Are you the type to point the finger or extend a hand? If this story touched you, it's because it speaks to something that exists in all of us. The desire to be loved, to be forgiven, to be able to start over. We live in such fast-paced, superficial times that we forget the power of looking at someone with empathy, respect, and emotional intelligence. Life isn't about always getting it right. It's about having the courage to start over when all seems lost. So tell me, what are you hiding from yourself that it's time to face? And even more so, what part of your story is waiting for your forgiveness? If this reflection made you think, touched your heart, or made you want to change something in your life, don't keep it to yourself. Comment below. What part of Samuel's story impacted you the most? And what would you have done in his place? I want to hear your opinion, because it's in this space of dialogue that transformation begins. And of course, if you want to continue following stories like this, stories that inspire, provoke, and heal, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and come with us. Because here, we don't tell stories just to entertain. We count to transform.